This is part one of a two-part series on how I paint ork skin. You've probably seen some of my orks on Instagram, and I often get a question on how I do it. So we're going to use this simple Ork Boy to demonstrate. So I've primed up the Ork Boy with Vallejo black primer, which I passed through the airbrush. And speaking of airbrush, all these first steps are going to be with my Iwata Revolution. It's top feed, dual action, pretty simple. It's like the poor man's Eclipse. But if you're really feeling brave, you could probably do all these steps with a really soft dry brush. But it's far superior to use the airbrush. Okay, my first color is Wog Flesh, and I'm using the Vallejo Airbrush Flow Improver. That's gonna just help make sure I don't clog the airbrush, and just lets me apply super thin coats slowly to the boy. So I just start out with building just a very even coat over all of the skin areas of this first color. Pretty simple. This could be done again with a brush and just keeping the paint really thin. I just prefer to use the airbrush because it applies a really even thin coat. Okay, the next color is going to be the Skarsnik Green. It's going to be really the primary color of the skin. It's kind of used as an accent color. I shoot it almost top down, zenithal style, but it's really meant to lighten and catch all the raised surfaces, so it's not purely top down. You'll see he gets pretty light in these early stages, and I kind of like it that way. Okay, color number 3 is Ushabti Bone. This is going to be purely a zenithal top-down highlight. It's really meant to just really punch up and simulate that overhead light. You'll notice, again, the skin gets pretty light with this top-down highlight, but that'll get knocked back a little bit in a later stage with the wash, and subsequently in part 2 when we do some of the brush work. You can see that top-down bone color really gives a beautiful looking highlight. Okay, and our last color through the airbrush is the Cadian Flesh Tone. This is really used as an accent color. I like to put it on the lower jaw of the orcs, the chest area, on areas where the skin gets pulled tight. So, you'll see I'll eventually get to his elbows. It's great for scarred areas as well, and creates some nice color variation in the skin. The last step to this first part of laying down the base colors of the skin is to use some of the Anthonian camo shade and wash the hell out of this guy. I tend to be pretty liberal with the washes. I could probably be more delicate, but I tend to just lay it on thick and then come back in and pull out areas that the wash is pooling too much. There ends up being a little bit of coffee staining on the flat areas, but I'm not worried about that too much because that tends to get cleaned up when I go back in with the brush in part 2. Okay, that's it for part 1 of laying down the base colors on the skin. You can see I just painted the other details black just to show some of the color and variation in the skin up to this point, but I really think it starts to come alive in part 2. And thanks for watching. Follow me on Instagram over at Quarter Paint, and feel free to message me if you have any video requests.